The classic sitcom Dennis the Menace, 1959 to 1963, remains a beloved part of television history, capturing the mischievous adventures of young Dennis Mitchell and the many colorful characters in his world. While the show brought joy and laughter to audiences, many of the talented actors who brought these characters to life have since passed away, some under tragic circumstances. From child stars who faced struggles later in life to veteran actors who left behind lasting legacies, their stories are both fascinating and heartbreaking. In this video, we take a look at 35 actors from Dennis the Menace who are no longer with us, exploring their careers, personal journeys, and the impact they had on television. Gloria Henry played the caring and devoted Alice Mitchell in Dennis the Menace in 1959 at 36, presenting an image of maternal warmth that resonated with audiences. In reality, her personal life was tumultuous. After the show's end, her career faltered, and she struggled to secure meaningful roles, with Hollywood casting her aside as she aged. Her marriage to renowned architect Craig Ellwood appeared glamorous, but behind closed doors, it was filled with tension and infidelity. The couple eventually divorced, leaving Henry to raise their 3 children alone. Financial hardship and loneliness became defining aspects of her later years, as she watched younger actresses take the roles she once dreamed of. Despite brief moments of rediscovery, she largely lived in quiet solitude, outliving most of her peers. On April 3, 2021, she died at 98, her contributions to television largely overlooked, a star from another era fading into history. Herbert Anderson portrayed the patient and understanding Henry Mitchell in Dennis the Menace in 1959 at the age of 42, embodying the ideal father who maintained a calm demeanor despite his son's endless mischief. However, the success of the show became a curse, as Anderson struggled to escape the shadow of his most famous role. His career declined, and offers dwindled, leaving him financially strained. His marriage to Elizabeth was far from happy, marked by long periods of separation and emotional distance. Although they had 2 children, Anderson's increasing professional failures and declining health drove a wedge between him and his family. In his later years, he suffered from multiple health problems, culminating in a devastating stroke that left him physically weakened and unable to work. Isolated and largely forgotten by Hollywood, he lived his final years in quiet obscurity. On June 11, 1994, he passed away at 77 due to complications from the stroke, his once promising career reduced to a distant memory. Charles Seel played the grumpy yet oddly lovable Mr. Crinky in Dennis the Menace in 1960 at the age of 63. Known for his frequent portrayals of curmudgeonly old men, Seel's career spanned decades, but he was never a household name. His personal life was equally underwhelming, his marriage ended in quiet disillusionment, and his 2 children drifted away, having little interest in maintaining a relationship with their emotionally distant father. He lived out his later years alone in a small, cluttered apartment filled with old scripts and fading memories of a career that never quite took off. His health declined rapidly in the late 1970s, and by 1980, he was a frail shadow of his former self. On April 19, 1980, at the age of 82, he passed away in his sleep, unnoticed for hours until a neighbor checked in on him. His death was unceremonious, a quiet exit for a man who spent his final years in near total isolation. Billy Booth played Tommy Anderson, Dennis's mischievous best friend, in Dennis the Menace in 1959 at the age of 10, bringing energy and excitement to the role. However, his early success did not translate into a lasting Hollywood career. Struggling to find work as he grew older, Booth became one of many child actors left behind by the industry. Feeling disillusioned, he abandoned acting altogether and pursued law, eventually becoming a lawyer. While successful in his new field, his personal life was marred by failed relationships and a deep-seated resentment toward the entertainment industry that had discarded him. He battled health issues in his later years, suffering from severe liver disease that progressively worsened. His final years were spent away from the public eye, struggling with declining health and the quiet realization that his childhood fame had long since faded. On December 31, 2006, he passed away at just 57 due to complications from liver disease. Mary Wickes played the stern yet kind-hearted Miss Esther Cathcart in Dennis the Menace in 1959 at the age of 49. Her character, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp wit, often found herself exasperated by Dennis's antics but ultimately had a soft spot for him. Wickes's career spanned decades, but despite her success in Hollywood, she never found lasting happiness. She was typecast as the sharp-tongued, spinsterish woman, a reflection of her personal life, where she never married or had children. In private, Wickes struggled with loneliness, pouring herself into her work to avoid the silence of an empty home. In her later years, she faced declining health and was left mostly alone, her closest friends long gone. She underwent surgery in 1995, but complications set in, and she passed away on October 22, 1995, at the age of 85. She died alone in a hospital bed, with no immediate family by her side. Willard Waterman played Otis Quigley at 45, the kindly shopkeeper who was always patient with Dennis and his antics. Though he had a respectable career, he lived in the shadow of Harold Peary, whom he replaced as the Great Gildersleeve, a comparison that followed him for the rest of his life. This unshakable association often made him feel like a placeholder rather than a true star, leading to quiet resentment. His marriage endured, but it lacked warmth, and with no children, he faced old age with growing isolation. As his health declined, a diagnosis of bone marrow disease left him in severe pain, each day a battle against his deteriorating body. His final years were marked by solitude and suffering, as his contributions to entertainment were gradually forgotten. On February 2, 1995, at the age of 80, he succumbed to the disease, his once strong presence reduced to frailty, his career overshadowed by what might have been. Joseph Kearns played the grumpy but ultimately lovable George Wilson in Dennis the Menace in 1959 at 52, bringing both humor and exasperation to the role of the cranky neighbor. Though his character was a staple of the show, his real-life existence was much lonelier. A lifelong bachelor, Kearns devoted himself entirely to his career, but despite his talent, he was never able to achieve major stardom outside of character roles. His life revolved around his work, leaving him isolated in his personal life. Tragically, just as Dennis the Menace was reaching its peak in popularity, Kearns suffered a sudden cerebral hemorrhage and never recovered. His unexpected death in 1962 shocked the show's cast and crew, forcing the series to awkwardly continue without him. He died on February 17, 1962, at 55, leaving behind a legacy that, while fondly remembered by fans of classic television, was largely forgotten as time passed. Irene Tedrow played Mrs. Elkins at 52, a neighbor often entangled in Dennis's mischief. A dedicated character actress, she built an impressive resume spanning film, television, and theater, yet never reached mainstream recognition. Though respected by peers, she struggled with the frustration of being perpetually cast in small, forgettable roles while others received acclaim. Married to William Kent, she raised 2 children, but her dedication to acting often kept her away from home, leaving her with lifelong guilt over not being a more present mother. As she aged, a series of strokes robbed her of her independence and her voice, the very tool that had defined her career. In her final years, she was confined to a nursing home, unable to communicate, a tragic fate for a woman once so full of life. On March 10, 1995, at the age of 87, she passed away due to complications from her strokes, fading into obscurity despite decades of dedication to her craft. Sylvia Field portrayed the gentle and loving Martha Wilson in Dennis the Menace in 1959 at 58, acting as the soft-hearted counterpart to her husband's gruff demeanor. Her real-life story, however, was far less comforting. Twice married, she faced heartbreak and professional struggles, with Hollywood quickly losing interest in aging actresses. By the time the golden age of television had passed, Field found herself relegated to minor guest roles and, eventually, complete obscurity. Financial insecurity and isolation defined her final years, as she outlived many of her co-stars and contemporaries. She spent her last years in near solitude, her contributions to early television barely acknowledged. On July 31, 1998, she passed away at 97 from natural causes, a forgotten relic of a bygone era, her once familiar face now only a memory to devoted fans of classic television. George Cisar played Sergeant Theodore Mooney at 47, the good-natured policeman who frequently found himself dealing with Dennis's well-meaning troublemaking. Though he became a familiar face on television, he was never more than a supporting player, typecast as authority figures and denied the chance to expand his range. This professional frustration was a constant undercurrent in his life, as he watched peers rise while he remained stagnant. His marriage to Beatrice lasted, but financial difficulties and emotional distance left cracks in their relationship. Their only son grew distant, and in later years, father and son barely spoke, a source of deep pain for Cisar. His health began to fail in the late 1970s due to heart disease, leading to frequent hospitalizations and a growing sense of helplessness. On June 13, 1979, at the age of 66, he passed away, his life ending with the same quiet resignation that had defined much of his career. Sara Seegar portrayed Eloise Wilson in 1959 at 45, the warm and patient wife of John Wilson, who balanced her husband's stern nature with kindness and understanding. Though she had a long career in film and television, she never achieved stardom, often playing secondary characters that failed to showcase her full potential. This quiet struggle with obscurity haunted her throughout her life. She married actor and director Ezra Stone, and while their relationship was affectionate, the absence of children cast a shadow over their later years. She poured her energy into acting, but as opportunities dwindled with age, she found herself increasingly sidelined, leading to feelings of invisibility. In her final years, she battled health problems that limited her independence, leaving her reliant on others for basic needs. On August 12, 1990, at the age of 76, she suffered a sudden cerebral hemorrhage, passing away without warning. Gale Gordon took over as John Wilson in 1962 at the age of 56. Playing the gruff but secretly caring uncle figure to Dennis. His portrayal captured a sharp wit and a stern presence that concealed a soft heart, making the character both formidable and endearing. Gordon had a long career in radio, television, and film, yet despite his undeniable talent, he often found himself overshadowed by bigger stars. Though he worked steadily, the transition from radio to television left him feeling like a relic of a bygone era. Married to Virginia Curley since 1937, their childless marriage was a quiet sorrow they rarely spoke of, and as they aged, loneliness crept in. In his later years, he withdrew from Hollywood to live in solitude on his avocado farm, where declining health made daily life increasingly difficult. The diagnosis of lung cancer came as a heavy blow, and his final months were spent in suffering, battling the disease until his passing on June 30, 1995. At the age of 89. Charles Lane played the stern Lawrence Finch in 1960 at the age of 55, portraying a strict, no-nonsense figure whose rigid demeanor mirrored the typecast roles he was often given. Though Lane had an extensive career with over 250 film and television appearances, he was never a leading man, always relegated to background roles. Despite his success, he was deeply dissatisfied, feeling underappreciated in an industry that valued youth and charisma over his hardened, authoritative presence. His marriage to Ruth Covell lasted over 7 decades, but it was far from warm. His obsession with work made him emotionally distant, and his children, Tom and Alice, grew up in a home where love was rarely expressed. In his later years, outliving most of his colleagues, he withdrew from public life, becoming a relic of a bygone era. As his health deteriorated, he found himself abandoned by the very industry he had devoted himself to. He passed away on July 9, 2007, at the age of 102 from natural causes. Norman Leavitt played Brown and Dennis the Menace in 1959 at the age of 46, portraying a friendly and helpful character. A prolific character actor, he appeared in numerous television shows like The Twilight Zone and Perry Mason, but he never escaped bit roles, always overshadowed by bigger stars. His career decline in the 1970s left him financially strained, relying on meager residuals that barely covered his expenses. His personal life was equally tragic. He married twice, both ending in bitter divorces, and his only daughter, Jennifer, distanced herself, unable to cope with his growing bitterness and financial struggles. As his health deteriorated, dementia robbed him of his memories, leaving him trapped in a fog of confusion. In his final years, he lived in a care facility, forgotten by the industry he had spent decades serving. He passed away on December 11, 2005, at the age of 92, from dehydration and complications of dementia, dying in quiet obscurity, just as he had lived. Will Wright portrayed the grumpy yet lovable Mr. Merivale in Dennis the Menace in 1959 at age 65, perfectly fitting the role of the irritable but ultimately endearing elder. With a long career playing cantankerous old men in films and television, he had worked steadily but was never given the substantial roles he craved. A deeply private man, he was twice divorced and had no children, living out his later years in quiet bitterness. Hollywood's growing preference for younger talent left him struggling to find work, and he gradually withdrew from the industry. Diagnosed with cancer in his final years, he refused treatment, resigned to his fate and unwilling to prolong the inevitable. His last days were spent alone, with few reaching out to check on him. He passed away on June 19, 1962, at age 68, his death receiving little attention, a stark reminder of how quickly Hollywood moves on from those it no longer finds useful. Alan Hewitt played Alastair St. Clair in Dennis the Menace in 1960 at age 45, portraying a character full of sophistication and charm. Despite his numerous supporting roles in My Favorite Martian and That Touch of Mink, he never escaped the confines of typecasting and struggled with the knowledge that he would never be a leading man. The frustration of Hollywood's indifference led him into a downward spiral of heavy drinking, further damaging his reputation and making it even harder to secure roles. Never married and without children, Hewitt led an isolated life, with fleeting friendships that faded as his career declined. In his later years, cancer ravaged his body, and with no immediate family to care for him, he faced his final days alone. By the time he passed away on November 7, 1986, at age 71, he had become a nearly forgotten figure, his name barely remembered in an industry that had long since discarded him. Laurence Haddon played Charles Brady in 1961 at the age of 38, portraying a warm and supportive figure, a stark contrast to the struggles he faced in real life. Though he found steady work in television, he never secured a defining role, leading to constant financial instability. His marriage to Mary Haddon, initially strong, crumbled under the weight of his unfulfilled ambitions, leaving their son, James, caught in the crossfire of resentment. As years passed, his career dwindled, and his health deteriorated with the onset of Lewy body disease, a cruel condition that robbed him of his memory and ability to recognize even his closest family members. In his final years, he was placed in a care facility, confused and frightened, often calling out for people long dead. He passed away on May 10, 2013, at the age of 90, his mind having left him long before his body finally gave in. Helen Kleeb portrayed the gentle Mrs. Holland in Dennis the Menace in 1959 at age 52, delivering a warmth that made her character memorable. Though she later gained recognition for her role as Miss Mamie Baldwin in The Waltons, she spent much of her career in minor, often thankless roles, struggling for recognition in a male-dominated industry that offered limited opportunities for aging actresses. Married to Elmer Garrison, she longed for children but was never able to have them, a sorrow that weighed heavily on her as she aged. As Hollywood turned away from older women, her opportunities dwindled, leaving her isolated and longing for the days when she was needed on set. She withdrew from public life, living quietly in her final decades, largely forgotten by those she had worked alongside. She passed away on December 28, 2003, at age 96 from natural causes, her passing barely noted, a quiet end to a lifetime of dedication to a business that had little memory of her. Maurice Manson played Mr. Timberlake in 1960 at the age of 47, portraying a wise and kind mentor, but his personal life was filled with regret and loneliness. His career never reached the heights he had dreamed of, leaving him forever chasing roles that never came. He married twice, but both marriages were fraught with unhappiness. His first wife left him after years of neglect, while his second marriage disintegrated in a storm of infidelity and bitter arguments. His only daughter, Marie, moved overseas, severing ties with him completely, leaving him to grow old with no one by his side. As roles became scarce, Manson struggled financially, forced to take on whatever work he could find, even if it meant humiliatingly small bit parts. By his later years, he had faded entirely from Hollywood's memory, his name spoken only by those who happened to stumble upon his old films. He died on September 21, 2002, at the age of 89, in near obscurity, with no family at his bedside. Bob Hastings played Coach Gilmore in Dennis the Menace in 1961 at age 36, portraying a supportive and encouraging mentor. Though he maintained a steady career in television and voice acting, including his well-known role as Commissioner Gordon in Batman, the animated series, he never achieved the A-list status he once dreamed of. Hastings worked tirelessly, but financial struggles and the pressure to provide for his family took a toll on him. Married to Joan Rice, he had 4 children, yet his frequent absences strained their relationship, and he often expressed regret over missing important family moments. As Hollywood's interest in him faded, he battled depression and anxiety, feeling discarded by an industry that had once embraced him. His health deteriorated in his later years, as he suffered from prostate cancer, enduring a slow and painful decline. He passed away on June 30, 2014, at age 89, largely forgotten by the entertainment world, his contributions overshadowed by more prominent names. Charles Watts played Ballard Fillmore in 1960 at the age of 48, presenting an eccentric and endearing figure on screen, yet his off-screen life was filled with struggle. He married twice, but both unions ended in bitter divorce, with his ex-wives citing his inability to provide stability. His only son, disillusioned by his father's gambling addiction and erratic behavior, severed all ties with him, leaving Watts to face old age alone. As Hollywood's demand for his talents faded, he struggled to find work, leading to mounting debt and desperation. In his later years, dementia set in, stealing what little dignity he had left, rendering him a confused and lonely man in a nursing home where no one visited. He passed away on December 13, 1966, at the age of 54, a man who once brought laughter to others but died without anyone to mourn him, his life ending in quiet and heartbreaking solitude. Robert B. Williams played the cheerful Mr. Dorfman in 1959 at the age of 55, bringing a sense of warmth to the character, though his real life was anything but happy. A lifelong supporting player, Hollywood never granted him the recognition he craved, leaving him to take on countless minor roles without ever making a lasting impact. His personal life was even more tragic. His marriage fell apart under the weight of financial struggles, and his wife took their 2 daughters, cutting him out of their lives entirely. Heartbroken and alone, he turned to alcohol, which only deepened his problems, leading to severe health complications. A stroke in 1975 left him partially paralyzed, dependent on charity and the kindness of distant friends. As the years passed, he withdrew from society, ashamed of what he had become. He passed away on June 17, 1978, at the age of 73, a forgotten man who had once brought joy to audiences but spent his final days in despair and isolation. Forrest Lewis played Mr. Prince in Dennis the Menace in 1960 at the age of 61, portraying a kind and wise character. A veteran actor, he built a long but unremarkable career in supporting roles, often playing small-town figures or authority figures in films and television. Despite decades in Hollywood, he never received widespread recognition, and as he aged, roles became scarce. His personal life was equally unfulfilling. His marriage to Margaret ended in divorce, and he had no children, leaving him with no family to turn to in his later years. As his career faded, he faced mounting health issues, struggling with high blood pressure and heart disease. In 1975, he suffered a debilitating stroke that left him partially paralyzed and unable to work. With no one to care for him, he was placed in a nursing home, spending his final years in isolation. He died on June 2, 1977, at the age of 77, from a heart attack, largely forgotten by an industry that had moved on without him. Who is your favorite character in Dennis the Menace? How do you feel knowing that the actors have passed away? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thank you so much.